The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
Welcome to Albany County News. I'm Mary Rozak, the Director of Communications for Albany County. And in the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to talk about an issue that has been everywhere. Newspapers, television, radio. You can't go anywhere unless you have heard about sexual harassment in some way, shape, or form. Joining me today is the Director of the Crime Victim and Sexual Violence Center in Albany County, Karen Ziegler, the Director. Karen, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Mary.
Well, it's good to have you back. And you know, the topic, while it is a topic that makes many people uncomfortable, some people snicker, right? Some people are hearing all kinds of things, and they say, you know, how can this be? How could things have happened for so long? How can people think one thing and others think another? We're talking sexual harassment and what started with Harvey Weinstein.
Yes.
And all of the allegations, I think, you know, there are over 80 women who've come forward. And subsequent to the news with Harvey Weinstein and the allegations of sexual harassment, sexual assault that are being investigated, we're then hearing about Kevin Spacey. We're hearing about Jeffrey Tambor. We're hearing about, you know, it's like everyone's coming out of the woodwork. What is going on?
I think it's been a very interesting phenomenon. For some reason, I think there's just been an opportunity this year for particularly women to come forward and acknowledge that they have been the victim of violence. I think there have been rumblings. We had the Bill Cosby situation, and we had multiple women coming out around that. It's been bubbling up, and I think one of the people that was involved with Harvey Weinstein started the Me Too campaign. And they got involved, and I think it spread like wildfire. I think there has been this undercurrent of sexual harassment and as a form of sexual violence against women, particularly women. And no way do I want to suggest this is not that men can't be victims, particularly young men, but I'm going to specifically speak to women today. It's been there. So I think with the Me Too campaign, it really lit a fire in women. I can tell you in the past week, we've had multiple calls. It started off a little bit slowly. I know the Me Too came out and people were addressing it, and we didn't hear about it right away, but we're getting hotline call after hotline call of women who are needing to vent, needing to express their anger, their frustration, the fact that they are recognizing that they were victims. I think a lot of this is that there's been a boys will be boys mentality. There's been a certain allowance made for behavior that is sexual harassment, but it's been accepted. It's been accepted by other men, and it's been accepted by women. And I think at this point, women are saying we're not going to be hugged against our wishes, be kissed against our wishes, or touched, or propositioned, or any number of different behaviors. And I think women are saying enough is enough. And maybe this is coming out again. We have the Enough is Enough campaign in New York, and there's the affirmative consent, which is in New York, it's in California, it's in Illinois. So I'm wondering if there's just a convergence of factors that have come together where women are feeling more powerful and feeling that they are more likely to be heard now, maybe than before ever in their lives.
Let me ask you a couple of things from what you just said. So, boys will be boys. And I get that, but there are those that are out there that are saying, how could something, particularly with Harvey Weinstein, we are talking a very powerful man, and so arguably some could say because of the amount of power he had to make or break careers, and we look at the Angelina Jolies, the Gwyneth Paltrows, we look at the very top echelon of the world of actresses that are saying that they've had instances. But how could it have been quiet for so long? I mean, I think that's what some people are scratching their heads about. I think that's what the similarity with the Bill Cosby at first. At first, when people were saying that they didn't believe what happened, how could it go on for so long? So many people know about it, and nobody talks about it.
I think there's a couple of different factors that are in play. I think part of it is a certain social acceptance of of harassment, of men exerting their power and control over women. And I think that, again, from the schoolyards, when little boys, again, it can be very heteronormative.
Sure,
just acknowledging that.
Get it.
When little boys hit or punch a little girl or pull on their bra straps or pull on their hair, and teachers say, oh, well, it's because he likes you. Well, we're starting very, very young to tell young girls, well, boys are going to be violent if they like you, and you have to accept it. The boys aren't corrected. The girls are told, well, you have to understand, this is how that this little boy is expressing his interest in you, but it's through violence. And I think there's that piece as young girls grow up, there's other instances of this. And then we see a lot of the times in high school, if there's some sexual violence that happens in high school and college, the victim is often victimized. They're often vilified and harassed online. They're scapegoated. They're the target of great anger from friends of the perpetrator, of allies of the perpetrator. If there's a sorority or athletic club involved, that we're seeing young women dropping out of school, just the harassment continues from allies of the perpetrator. So we have that. I think that we've allowed men to identify as good guys even when they're engaging in sexual harassment. I sent you an email today. There was a wonderful series of little vignettes that David Schwimmer did, and we have it posted on the Crime Victims website, and I'm looking to get it, Facebook page, and I'm looking to get it put on our website, where they had an interesting conversation with people who were involved in the production of these 6 little vignettes, talking about they thought they were good guys, but looking at the behavior, they recognized that they were behaving with women in ways that could be considered sexual harassment, and they'd never identified it as such. There was one person said that when he would enter or leave a room, he'd hug the women, and then he acknowledged he never hugged the men. So thinking he's a great guy and he's so friendly, but isn't it a power thing when you only hug the women?
And let's talk about this, because there are those schools of thought, and some people sit back, and some people that'll be watching this are going to say, are you kidding me?
Right.
I can't even go in and give a hug or a peck on the cheek. At what point have we gone too far? At what point is it sexual harassment?
Right.
And at what point, and how do you balance the two? And I know you're going to say avoid the behavior completely.
Oh, actually, I wouldn't say that.
No, okay.
Absolutely not. We do accompaniments, emergency room accompaniments. So when people have been victimized, and even if someone comes to us as a client, what I'd say to the person is it okay if I touch your hand? And especially during an emergency room accompaniment when a person's just been sexually assaulted, some people feel they welcome some kind of physical contact. Sure. Some people do not want to be touched at all.
Sure.
So I think asking is the place to start. I'm not saying you should never hug someone or never kiss someone. I think that would certainly be an absurd response. But what if we asked someone? What if we, before we touch someone, to say, is it okay? I'm a hugger. Do you feel comfortable with my hugging you, or are you not a hugger? And make it absolutely okay for the person to say, I'm not a hugger.
And I think that's a great place, a great point to make, and a great place to start. But what about, we've had the recent, the newest allegations where there is someone running for political office, and a woman has come forward, and at first she said it was consensual, then she said, well, it wasn't consensual, and how do you know if you're even asking?
Right.
Someone,
right,
that they might not turn around later and say, you know what, I was harassed. I felt like the person was in a position where I had to say yes. It was uncomfortable, to say no, I don't want to hug.
Right.
Absolutely.
And as the mother of a young man, when he went off to college, we had long conversations about consent and getting consent and being involved with someone in a very intimate way, and the fact that people can say something in the heat of the moment, and then the next day they might look back at it and recognize that they were not in a condition to consent, or that they were responding to something that they regretted, and the fact that that perhaps they said yes to one thing, and then they only meant that one thing, but it progressed further than that one thing, and they didn't know how to say no past that. So recognizing that just because a person will allow a hug or a kiss or a touch on a certain place does not mean they want the next 5 or 10 behaviors or activities. So we talked about that the communication is the most important thing, and and I think it will feel awkward because it's going to be a new behavior. What I'm going to suggest is, what if you say, does this feel okay? And I'd like to touch you, does this feel okay? And then you stop and, I'd like to kiss you, does this feel okay? And yes, I think it's going to be very awkward because it's not something that we do, but what if we stopped and said, does this feel okay? I'd like to do this, does this feel okay? Is this okay with you? And we checked in with our partner before we started every new activity,
Sure.
or at any point in time to say, does this feel, and I think it's also being very aware of ourselves. If a person stiffens up, that's the message, it's not okay.
Sure.
And not to continue, just to maybe to take your hands off the person and say, wait a minute, I felt something here, and I'm not sure if this is okay anymore. Let me check in with you. This felt like something to me. What's going on? And so I think it requires a level of communication that we as a society, as a community, may be uncomfortable with because it's going to be new, but we do new things all the time.
Sure.
We didn't have smartphones a few years ago, and we're all addicted. We're all on our smartphones.
Yep.
So
the phone is smarter than I am. I think
absolutely,
sometimes, right?
We can learn new behaviors, and I'm going to suggest that something like that, where if this person is relatively, or this is a new activity for you with this person, or even if you've been into it with the person in the past, but maybe just checking in with them to say, we just had dinner together, and I'd like to be intimate with you. Is that okay with you? And when I say intimate with you, what does that mean to you? I'll tell you what it means to me, and really make sure you're on the same page, that you and the person you're with are agreeing to the behaviors, both of you agreeing to the behaviors, and knowing what those boundaries are. I think that's, if you want to do it, I would offer that you need to be able to talk about it.
Sure. And we're talking, of course, I should make a clarification, we are talking about in social settings.
Yes.
We are talking not about a work setting, because
Absolutely.
there are very different guidelines.
Yes.
I mean, really, there is no hugging. There is none of that. I mean,
Right.
And companies do have training. I know Albany County, we do
Yes.
have we do have that as well. What you can and can't do. And there are times when people that come into the workplace to visit may not follow those same norms, but that's very different. So I want to make sure that I say that. You said you'd have gotten more calls.
Yes.
The calls that you're getting, what can you do for the people at the other end of the phone? What can the Crime Victim and Sexual Violence Center do?
We can acknowledge, we can witness, we can hear them express themselves, we can affirm what they're saying. One woman in particular wanted to know what they could do with their very strong feelings, and we were talking about things like journaling, different things they could research, things that there was a suggestion that they wanted to, with the journaling, come in and maybe we offer free and confidential therapy, counseling for people. So people who've been affected by other people's victimization. So certainly people can journal all by themselves. There's lots of things you can Google. But if a person wants support through the journaling, and journaling is one of the most, I think, affirmative healing ways to manage strong emotions and memories, we can offer that support for as long as the person would like. So people who enjoy writing or words or language, journaling. Some people...
So writing about the experience, writing about what they're feeling, writing about what?
It can be a number of different things, and that's like if they want to have it kind of guided, to please come in and contact us and we can work with you. But even go on Google journaling for sexual assault victims, and there are many things. You may or may not want to journal about the particular assault. What you may want to journal about is how it's affecting you today.
Okay.
What are your feelings today? I feel afraid to go out of my house. I feel afraid to go out after dark. How is it impacting your life today? I have difficulty forming trusting relationships.
How does writing about it help?
I think what it does is it helps. It moves the thoughts and the emotions from one part of your brain to the other. And we'll talk about right brain, left brain. Memory is in one place, and I think activities are in a different side of the brain. So it literally moves the memories and it moves the emotions. And then journaling almost literally almost provides a way out of the body, a way out of the mind.
Okay.
So that you can, when you put it on the page, you can close it and literally close the thoughts and memories for a period of time until maybe you're ready to open them up again. And I think it changes over time. So it may be, even if it's 5 minutes rest or an hour rest or a day's rest, as opposed to having these thoughts circling and circling and circling. So journaling can help. For people who aren't that fond of words, coloring, drawing, and it doesn't have to be artistic, but it could be certain colors and certain shapes. Again, just it gets the emotion and the energy out of the body onto a piece of paper.
Okay.
It could be, getting Play-Doh and making shapes and maybe destroying them. Maybe like making something and then that could represent a feeling or a memory that's difficult and destroying it and letting it go and breaking the hold that thought or emotion has over you. So there are a number of different things that can be done. Again, there are wonderful toolkits out there, and we certainly can help anybody who'd like to have some support around this, because these are some difficult feelings and difficult memories. And if someone wants to do them with a trusted friend or with a counselor or a therapist, I definitely, there are a number of different programs out there, and certainly our program is very available. To do things with children, with adults, with like friends and roommates, partners can also be affected by someone's assault.
I am talking with the director of the Albany County Crime Victim and Sexual Violence Center, Karen Ziegler, today. So, Karen, we've talked a little bit about, the touching. We've talked about even, as much as assault. Sexual harassment, though, also can be manifested in other ways.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about that and what those impacts can be on someone. Sexual harassment verbally.
Absolutely. It can be the language that's used. It could be terminology. It could be that they use graphic language. They can refer to a woman in a way that's very objectifying and derogatory. And I think that is actually sometimes even harder, because when a person is touched, there's a sensation. If a person uses a word and then they're told, oh, you're so sensitive, or you're being a girl, or you're being, the response is being dismissed and minimized. The person's self-esteem and self-confidence can erode over time, and they can buy into the objectification, and they can buy into the thought that they don't have any power and they can't do anything to change this.
So that is a harassment.
Absolutely.
You're so sensitive. You're so... Okay.
Absolutely.
But I mean...
Yes, because it's oftentimes it's related to it. So a person tells an off-color joke, and then someone doesn't laugh, and they'll say, oh, you're too sensitive. So the harassment could be the joke. And then it's followed up with, oh, you're so sensitive, you're being such a girl, where's your sense of humor? I didn't mean anything by, I thought you were fun. And then now you're left with, well, if I make a big deal of it, they're saying I'm uptight and I'm not fun, and they're defining me in a way that I don't want to be defined, instead of taking the power back and saying, you don't get to define me, that wasn't okay. The whole power dynamic continues into having the woman even define herself as powerless and really the recipient of all kinds of abuse.
Let's take this into the workplace and talk about a specific example. Someone working for the president of a company, a high-ranking person in the company, Harvey Weinstein.
Yes.
Secretaries have come forward.
Yes.
And said they didn't feel like there was nowhere for them to go.
Yes.
What do you do? What do you advise someone, as an expert in assisting in that field? What is someone to do? If you work for the president of the company, you work for that person. You can't go to your HR. Right.
Exactly.
What do you do?
That would be... I would honestly suggest that person might want to consider some counseling, and if nothing else, to really kind of tease out what are they feeling, what are they thinking, and really getting it normalized. It's normal and it's okay to feel helpless. It's normal and it's okay to feel powerless. You are powerless in this situation, and it's not because of any fault of yours. It's because of the situation you find yourself in. And at that point, then there's some decisions to be made. Oftentimes the first person who came forward about Harvey Weinstein was vilified. There were consequences to her career and her how people saw her. So I can't say that it's going to be all happy and rosy. What I can say is, I think it's important for women to feel witnessed. And I would put it, any survivor of abuse or violence need to feel witnessed, that someone heard them and acknowledged what happened to them and can say, I believe you and this was wrong. And that's so important, because the people around Harvey Weinstein did not say it was wrong, and they did not believe people, and they dismissed and they tolerated, and if nothing else, abetted some of the violence and the harassment. So a program like mine, a rape crisis program, can absolutely say, I believe you and this isn't okay. You have choices, and I'm not going to kid you. The choices may not be great. The choices may be that you leave this position and you take a position that's paid less or that has less power, but then that's the decision that you make, and we would support the person in whatever decision they made. But we think informed consent, informed decision making is really important. And do you want to stay here? And is there a way that you can stay here that's safe? And to take a page out of the domestic violence book, there's safety planning. Sometimes it's very dangerous for a person to leave a domestically violent relationship. The point of departure is often the point of lethality. So the person may choose to stay in the relationship for a lot of reasons, and one may be lethality, but when they do stay, we ask them to safety plan with us. How can they make themselves as safe as possible within this circumstance? So the same thing I would offer for people who may find themselves in a position where there's a very powerful person who's harassing them or being abusive to them. If you can't leave that position, let's say you have to be there for the income. That you're the income for your family, and you can't take a cut right now, or.
And I think we actually heard that in those instances with the Weinstein.
Yes. So can we safety plan around this? Can we talk about different things that you can do to feel more safe, to be more safe? And I think it would depend on the circumstance. But I think there are things that can be done to make a person, if nothing else, feel empowered, that they're saying this isn't okay, and I don't want to tolerate that, and then they can make decisions about whatever that means for them personally.
It sounds like when we're talking about the verbal aspect of this, and even I'll bring up years ago the Farrah Fawcett back in what was that, the 70s, late 70s or whatever, the posters that would go up in workplaces, and then that would be the very obvious, became the poster child, right, for the sexual harassment claims. But it sounds like a lot of this is so similar to bullying.
We look at it as crime victims, it's a spectrum. And we look at bullying, and then dating violence, relationship violence, domestic violence, sexual harassment, sexual assault, on a continuum. It's all about power, it's all about control. So absolutely, the bottom line, the foundation is power and control, and then it's just how it's manifested. That it may look a little different, it may sound a little different, but it's all about power and control. Absolutely, and it's about men, again, heteronormative, men wanting power and control over women, and by making remarks and making them feel disempowered and talking about their appearance and their behavior, it keeps women in their place where men can objectify them and can harass them and potentially even assault them for their own pleasure and for their own, to make themselves feel powerful at the expense of the person they're with.
Let's talk about also, we'll get into the political realm here, because on the congressional level, we've had female congressmen come out, and I say congressmen, congresswomen in the plural, come out and say that there is a problem. There's a problem in Congress. It's happened. In particular, there was a congressman whose name escapes me that has been cited, and the congresswoman that was talking about this said, but we're not going to name who that is. The victims don't want to name who that is. I think it was reported somewhere else. But the simple fact that you don't want to call someone out, but yet you want changes, what does that say? I mean, it just struck me as odd.
I agree. And I think that it's baby steps. So if a year ago they weren't saying anything, if they're acknowledging that there's a problem, that's a baby step. I think we can't have real change until we say, this is the person, and this is the behavior, and this is what happened. When I think a lot of people don't look at themselves. So if we say that if there's a group of people and we say, well, there's a problem that some of you are not finishing your work on time, oftentimes it's the people who are most guilty of it who don't think it applies to them. So I think you have to name names. You have to say, this is the person, and these are the behaviors, and these are the issues. And until you do that, I don't think we can affect real change. Is it because the woman who came forward was not the victim and she's protecting the person who is the victim? And if the individual is named, that victim may be outed and not ready to be outed? I like to think that would be the kind of situation.
I would like to think that, except that there were multiple women in this instance that had said that they, that agreed that this shouldn't. And disclosure. Disclosure agreements, non-disclosure agreements that are signed. I mean, that just seems to go against
Absolutely.
the healing process.
Absolutely, it does. It doesn't make the change that we need to have happen. Is it because this congressman is still in power, and the other people need him to support their legislation and to work with them, and that's why he's not being named? Is it because he's a nice guy, and for the most part, I mean, I think a lot of people that you've named before. Maybe not Harvey Weinstein, but there are a number of other actors and politicians and very public figures who have reputations as nice guys, and now they're being named. And I think that's stressful for people. People that they may have respected in the past are now being named as people who have engaged in harassment and possibly assault. And I think we're a little shell-shocked. So I'm not quite sure why the congresswomen aren't naming the individuals. I wish they would. I think, again, we have to have it on the table so that we can look at it before we can affect change. Otherwise, it's always the person who's involved can always define it as something else.
Sure.
Not me, not what I did. And then it shifts, but it isn't corrected. It isn't addressed.
What about the danger, in the last couple of minutes that we have, what about the danger of someone coming forward now? There are so many celebrities being named.
Yes.
There's the comedian, being named Louis, I can't think of
CK.
CK, being named, and people now being named, and they really truly may stand there and say, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Right.
What if it is someone now that there are a whole bunch of names out there, and someone coming forward with a vendetta, with a fake claim? How do at this point, once somebody's name is out there, it's almost like a big black X. You're done. What do you say to that for those naysayers that still there are those people that hang on and say, I just can't believe because.
Right. I'm going to say that false reporting in this realm is the same as false reporting in with any other crime, and it's between 2% and 7%. So I'm going to say that there is a possibility.
It's very small, 2 and 7%.
Exactly,
okay.
exactly. It's a very small percentage of people, but it is a possibility. Women, and I'm going to say primarily women who come forward, are often humiliated, targeted, harassed themselves. So while I'm going to acknowledge it is a possibility, I'm going to think that it's a very, very slim possibility because, again, I would think that most women, if not all women, know that if they come forward, the scrutiny will be on them. Our society in general likes to victim blame. We will tear her apart. We will look at her past. We will look at her allegations. We will look at her conduct to defend him. So any woman who's come forward and made this allegation had to have done it with a great deal of thought and clarity, because that's not going to go unchallenged by the industries and by the attorneys.
Karen, if someone's listening to this, number one, any call to you is confidential?
Absolutely. Free and confidential.
If people want to do the research a little bit more, albanycounty.com, tell us whereabouts, what they should be clicking on when they go to the website. I
would say please go to the Crime Victim and Sexual Violence website. We have a resource page. In fact, I'm trying to see if we can get those 6 the vignettes put up, because I think that they're a great way to, and they're short. I think the longest one is 5 minutes, and they're about 3 minutes, and they can be a little uncomfortable. But I think what they do is they expose some behaviors that have been accepted, and we can look at them in a new way.
Phone number for folks to call.
Our hotline is 518-447-7716, and that's a 24-hour hotline. And our office number is 518-447-7100.
There are so many other things that the Crime Victim and Sexual Violence Center does, and we'll have you back to talk about that. Your final thoughts in the last 30 seconds or so. Your final thoughts on this topic.
This is an exciting opportunity for us to really redefine relationships and what it is to be a man and a woman, and a person in our society. And I'd like to think that when we get through this, we'll be better. We'll be better as people and as partners and as colleagues. So I like to think that we're going to go to someplace that's very positive.
And as a mom, you think this is a good conversation to be had?
I think it's a critical conversation to have with all of your children, no matter what their gender, and we need to have these conversations.
All right, thanks, Karen. We'll have you back again soon to talk about all the other things that the SVC does. Thank you
so much, Mary.
We're talking to Karen Ziegler, Director of the Crime Victim and Sexual Violence Center in Albany County. I'm Mary Rozak. This has been Albany County News. We'll see you again soon.